Thanks so much, Emily, for taking the time and coming out to talk about this. I know it's not something you really expected to ever have to do, but I want to start with the dispute itself with Martha Ann Alito, Justice Alito's wife. I know it began after the 2020 election over yard signs that you had placed at your mother's home where you were living at the time. Can you start off by just explaining to me what those first yard signs you put out said?
Yes, and Erin, thank you so much for having me today. My first yard sign that I put up was an anti-Trump sign. It said F Trump in glitter cursive letters. And, you know, it was just as like a message to the world that I see Trump as a danger to our democracy. And I see him as a self-proclaimed fascist. Like he said, he wanted to be a dictator on day one of his presidency. And so I just use my small influence in my small corner of the world to just, you know, broadcast my views like that.
All right, so you put the F Trump sign out in glitter, and Mrs. Alito responds, right? So tell me about that, how she reacted.
Yeah, so there were a handful of times that we somewhat interacted, like not actually speaking, but you know, she kind of stopped in front of the house and gave us a long glare. And I just want to emphasize that the interaction that happened on February 15th is the one that they're using as an excuse for why they flew the flag. And I really want to hammer home the fact that that happened on February 15th. And their flag went up 2 or 3 weeks before that. So even if it were a valid excuse that they were having a dispute with a neighbor and that made them put the flag up, that timeline just disproves it. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And I want to go to that in detail. But first, just the very basic. When you put up the F Trump sign and she walks by and she glares, had you ever talked to her before? Did you realize that this was that this was Martha Ann Alito?
Yeah, so when I moved back to the area in 2020, I did know that the Alitos lived in the neighborhood. I didn't know which house. I didn't know what they looked like. And so it didn't take me long, though, to put 2 and 2 together.
And to realize who they were when she's standing outside. So you realize that she's upset about this. So then when January 6th happens, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Emily, because I'm trying to make sure I have all the timeline right as well, but you then added a yard sign, Trump is a fascist, which you just indicated you feel that way, and you are complicit. And I want to ask you about those specifically, because Justice Alito says that those specific signs, you are a fascist, and I'm sorry, Trump is a fascist, and you are complicit, were, quote, directed at his wife. Were they?
Yeah, no. So January 6th was a dark day for our democracy. And I think people of all ideologies feel that way. We all saw this direct threat to our democracy, and it was chilling. And so my putting up a sign that says Trump is a fascist, because I believe that he's a self-proclaimed fascist, and you are complicit, you includes everyone. It includes everybody in the GOP who, you know, endorsed this or didn't say anything against it, or Trump himself, who said, you know, stand by, and it's to everyone. And I also think it's to, you know, people on my side of the spectrum. It's like, what are we really doing to hold these people accountable for this attempted coup and insurrection? Like, we need to do more, I feel like.
And so, okay, so now let me get to the upside down American flag, because, and to go through this in a bit of detail, because I think here is where your point about what he is alleging happened here does not comport with the timeline. So the flag is flying. Justice Alito says his wife flew it because she was, quote, greatly distressed by her disputes with you. And in a letter just explaining his motivation to put up the flag, he says, and I quote him again, Emily, a house on the street displayed a sign attacking her personally. I guess that's the you are complicit, or you know, that you were just talking about, but that you say was not directed at her. And a man who was living in the house at the time trailed her all the way down the street and berated her in my presence using foul language, including what I regard as the vilest epithet that can be addressed to a woman, which is the C word. Now, let me just break this down, Emily. You say it was you who said those things. It was not your now husband. But you say Alito is lying here for another very basic reason. Can you explain?
So at best, he's mistaken, but at worst, he's just outright lying. And there was a neighbor who even witnessed this and witnessed me using that unfortunate term. And what else I said in that interaction is so important, and I hope it's not getting forgotten in the discourse around the word. In that interaction, she approached us, started screaming at us, used all of our full names, which to me felt like a threat because you're a stranger. We don't know you. You don't know us. How do you know our full names? And I started yelling, "How dare you?" Because they both were there at the same time. So I said, "How dare you? You're on the highest court in the land. You represent the Supreme Court of the United States. You're behaving this way. You're yelling at a neighbor. You're harassing us. How dare you? Shame on you." And I did use the word. So if that in any way, distracts from that real message, I do regret using the word because the message is important. It's like the power imbalance between these people and me. I'm nobody to them.
So,
and the fact they took umbrage with my sign is telling enough. It shows like a bias, doesn't it? I mean.
And I want to talk about that, but just to be very clear on the timing, he's saying that she put up the flag because you said those things. But when we look at, there was actually, you called 911 on that day. There's actually a police report about that incident. And that shows that the timing just doesn't work, right? The flag was up before. The flag picture that the New York Times had was weeks before that incident actually happened where you called her that word. So what he's saying here, you're saying at best mistaken, but it certainly is it's categorically by the dates not true, right? She didn't put the flag up for that reason.
Absolutely, 100%. And that's what I want to really drive home to people is that this happened on February 15th. And we know that because they had been harassing us so long that we were like, we need a paper trail of this. Like, we better call the cops right now. Like I said, these are federally protected people. They have security detail. They represent the judicial system. They are the law. And I am just a regular person. And so it's, we called the cops that day. It was February 15th. And I think the photo of the flag was on January 17th.
Yes.
So
the timing doesn't add up. I do think it's important, Emily, just to emphasize here that, this is happening between you, your husband, your household, and a Supreme Court justice and his wife. And a police report is called. I mean, it is pretty stunning just to even think about that. Can I just ask you about your interaction with him? He's there. He says this happened in his presence, this altercation where you're saying she was screaming at you with your full name and you responded with the C word. What did he do? What did he say?
He didn't say anything. And I find that very telling because I feel like in any other situation, somebody would step in if they see somebody like accosting someone like that, and they would say, "Hey, ease up a little bit. Let's go. Let's walk down the street." He didn't do anything. He just kept walking, and basically disappeared.
Never said a word. I mean, so I want to ask you about one other thing. Around this time, the Alito security detail started doing something that you perceived as threatening. They have a security detail, and something specific happened. What was it?
Yeah, so they have a security detail that parks in front of their house or like in front of the house across the street from them. We are 4 or 5 houses away, and sometimes that detail would be in front of our house, which, obviously I can't say for sure. I don't know what their motivation was, but we did take it as intimidating, especially when that same car reappeared in front of our house the day the New York Times article came out. And I don't know what else we're supposed to get from that.
But you certainly felt threatened. And let me just ask you, Emily, you talking before this, and I think I don't want to say anything inappropriate, but I know you were nervous to talk. You thought about this long and hard to decide whether you thought it was worthwhile to speak out. Why do you think it is so important that you tell this story?
I think it is monumentally important. I think our democracy is fragile, and we learned that on January 6th. And We see it all the time with people like Trump who say they want to be a dictator. These are serious, serious things. And I just want people, regular people like myself, to understand that we live in a democracy and we don't have to watch our democracy become a dictatorship or a fascist, Christian nationalist society. Like, we need to pay attention. We need to stand up, organize, and resist.
All right. Well, Emily, I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for talking to me.
It's really my pleasure. Thank you so, so much.